the issues facing many kind of boys and young men in education, but into higher education in particular, are felt most sharply, most acutely in many ways by Black men. AIBM has conducted research on this, which I know you know about, showing the declining share in enrollment of Black men, not least at HBCUs. And so I think there's huge appetite not only for cross learning between HBCUs themselves about what's happening around the kind of enrollment and retention of Black men in these institutions that are so important in many ways for upward mobility, particularly for Black students into professions, etc. But also, I think for other higher education institutions who may be able to learn from some of the challenges and successes that you've been involved in at Howard. So, with that, I'd just kind of love to open things up to people. For those who don't know who you are, Dr. Calvin Hadley is Assistant Provost for Academic Partnerships and Student Engagement at Howard, which I think is a long way of saying that he does everything that kind of makes Howard more awesome, especially for the Black men. And we'll drop a link to his full bio page into the chat. But with that, I'd just love you to kick off with where are you at Howard in terms of how you think about this specific issue of the challenges of Black men, and then we'll get into a conversation before opening up to others. So again, thank you, and over to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Richard. And I'm going to take some participants' privilege and say I'm really appreciative of you and your work. Right, I came across your work while writing my dissertation and was really interested in your analysis of the male malaise. So really appreciative of what you've been able to do with AIBM and HEMAC, and really excited to be here. So thanks for having me. And I want to say, as a part of your work, you are also very clear to speak about the decline of boys and men holistically, but you always put an emphasis on Black males, which I'm always really appreciative of, because as we analyze this, and I think AIBM and HEMAC have both outlined this, there's really a crisis taking place as it pertains to Black male inclusion in higher education. And as you pointed out, really throughout the entire P through 12, P through higher education pipeline. I want to draw attention to your study and to the first paragraph synopsis. In the first paragraph of that study, and I first want to say your study was phenomenal because it created a big buzz, right? After your study, I got a call. I'm sure they called you, but they also called me. I got a call from NPR, All Things Considered, and got a chance to go on and really, I think, expose a lot of people to this larger topic and got a lot of momentum. So I really thank you for that study. The first paragraph of that study was really interesting, and I want to take a moment to analyze that. You note this crisis, and you say there's been a significant decline from 1978, where the average male population at HBCUs was around 38%. That decline is now in around 2023, 2024 is down to about 26% as the national average for Black males at HBCUs. Stark, jumps off the page at you. There's one part, however, that I don't know jumps off the page at everybody, and that's the first line. The first line says that in 1978, HBCUs had an average male population of 38%. And we're reflecting on that time as the time of progress, as the time of positivity, right? And so when you analyze this paradigm from the very beginning, I think the data shows that many of us are not acculturated to see Black males as viable members of the higher education community, right? I think through a number of mechanisms, through our messaging, right, through the things that we've been taught. But I think that for many of us, we look at that 38% in 1978 and we say, we got to get back to that, right? When you think about 1978, that's only 6 years after the implementation of Title IX, right? And Title IX was created out of the full understanding that there are societal and systematic barriers that prohibit girls and women from access and success in higher education. So I think in framing this, it points to a big issue here, right? I think many people in this country have not been acculturated to see Black males as successful in education and in higher education. And I think that includes the Black male, right? We at Howard University have a total male population of around 28%. We have a Black male population that last time I looked was at 19%. I do have the data in 2025. What we're really clear on is that 19% of a Black male population at a HBCU is a very, very big issue for a number of reasons. And so what we're attempting to do as a university is, one, understand what's happening here. So we've done some analysis of the data to try to figure out what's going on. Two, how do we impact that? And three, how do we create an environment where students can come to Howard University, become a better version of themselves, and actually graduate to the other side, right? One thing that we don't necessarily dive into on the front end of the data is that graduation rates are also very low for Black men. And so at the university and really in the larger HBCU community, we have addressed this. We've been addressing this, but I think there's a more of a concerted effort holistically as a group to address this. Yesterday, I had an event, and I'll give you a
Mm.
shout out, Richard. My team had an event. It was a big listening session for our Black male students here at Howard University. Just a big listening session that's going to be tied to an IRB study that one of our team members is doing. And at that event, we had the leadership team for the Black male coalition at Morgan State. And the first thing they said is, yes, we're
Oh,
very familiar with Richard. Richard was here last year.
yeah, they're great.
So we work closely with Morgan State. I was really excited to see our brother and sister organization Claflin in Maryland mention that they had an increase in their Black male population. And so a part of what we're doing in the HBCU community is actually working across campuses. The HBCU community is also a very diverse space. So I want to kind of level set as we talk about this issue. There are 104 HBCUs, but they're also extremely diverse. So when we talk about the issue of lack of Black males in the higher education spectrum, especially at HBCUs, we're talking about it across very different institutions. You have Howard University, for example, we had about a 3.8 average GPA for our incoming class, a highly selective institution. Our average male GPA for this last incoming class was actually higher than our average female GPA. I'm sorry, our average male SAT was higher than our average female. At Howard, we identified that we have a significant issue in applications. So let me give a couple of data points to level set here. In 2025 application pool, and I can give this data because our president presented at a conference recently that I know is public. In 2025 applicant pool, we had a total of 40,348 applicants, total applicants. Of those applicants, 8,458 were Black men. 8,458 out of 40,000.
How many were Black? Sorry, maybe you're going to get to this, Calvin, but how many were Black out of that 40,000?
I don't have that. I will get that.
Okay.
I will get
Okay.
that.
Right, but you know that 8,000 were Black men of that 40,000. Yeah.
Were Black men.
Yeah.
When you look at that, there's a significant difference in those numbers of applications. Now, when we get to we enroll a similar proportion, right? When you look at that, we break that 8,000 into the 40,000, we're about around 20%. When you look at the enrolled, of course, the numbers go down drastically. We enrolled 2,498 people. 436 of them were Black men. So what we see is that, first of all, that number is stark and it jumps out at you. But the other thing that jumps out at you is that we are accepting students fairly proportionate to the application that we're receiving. Now, another really important thing as we think about those applications, right? I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper. For the 2005 application pool, the average GPA for a male was a 3.3. The average GPA for a female is a 3.39, which your data shows is young ladies have higher GPAs. Now, this is one thing that was really unique. The average GPA, the average SAT score for that applicant pool for a male was at 1243, where the average SAT score for a female in the application pool was 1151. So our males actually had a higher SAT score than our females. We also, when we look at the admitted, now that was the applicant pool. When we look at the admitted now, the average GPA for a male is a 3.71. The average GPA for a female is 3.76. And then those SAT scores level out a bit. You have 1243 and 1241 as the average for the males and females. What we're finding is that we're admitting a very educated male student. We are admitting a student that likely has a lot of opportunities to go to other institutions with that profile that he has. And we are also competing for that young person. So we only have a small pool to start with, much smaller than our young ladies, right? About 3 times what our young ladies have. And then as we think about the breakdown of that, we're now competing. And that's what a big part of what we're attempting to do is identify how do we bring those males in that are accepted into the institution? And also, how do we build out that pipeline? So I'm really excited to talk with you on the second end of this about the pipeline. But as it stands right now, what we understand is that we have the ability to impact the way we admit students But we also have to create an environment where we get much more applications from Black men. That's a specific analysis of Howard University. The reality is the HBCU community is diverse, but across the board, especially as your study showed, the average at every HBCU, that's from the HBCUs that have rolling admissions, the HBCUs that have open enrollment, to the highly selective HBCUs, we're still at around 26% as an average. And so what we see is that there's a systematic issue, right? This is not
Yeah.
just an issue at Howard because it's highly selective. This is a systematic issue where a lot of young Black men do not see themselves as college material, and they're not applying in the same numbers as their peers. And I think there are a lot of reasons
Yeah.
and data that we can dive into and talk about that a little bit more.
Yes, let's can we let's stay on this bit of
Yeah.
the pipeline because I love of course I love all that data and I think it'll be of interest to other people too. So because part of it is the question is like is this on the demand side, right? Is it that Black men are less likely to apply conditional to other institutions, right? Are HBCUs less attractive to Black men than they are to Black women? Do you know anything about that? How much of that how much of that gap is explained by the fact that the sort of Black men are sort of taking themselves off the field
Yeah.
to some extent before the game started because they look at someone like Howard and for whatever reason they just think, yeah, that's not for me, and I can instead go to, I don't know, pick institution of your choice that they could otherwise go to.
Yeah. So I think unfortunately we don't see a lot of Black men at PWI either. Right. There's not it's
Right.
not there's not to
Right. So
say
it's
that
not
they're
like they're
leaving.
going, yeah, yeah. So the alternative isn't necessarily that great. But you could imagine, because the numbers are so big at those other places that if you
Yeah.
did decide to go to the University of Maryland or the University of Alabama or kind of whatever,
Sure.
that would be. But you don't see any difference, as far as you can tell, between the interest at the application stage in HBCUs between Black men and Black women.
No, we're not seeing that in the data. We're not seeing that in the data. We're seeing less applicants coming
Yeah.
from our male students. I think a part of that is, it's tied to a number of things, right? But I think a big part of what we're seeing is that the males are not apply. Well, let's take it back, and we do have to go to P through 12 a little bit. If you look at
Yeah.
graduation rates, right, I think that we can solve this problem by just looking at data on the other side. Graduation rates from high school for Black males are also the lowest, right? And so when we're looking at the other end of that pipeline, just getting out of P through 12 education for Black males, they're not graduating at the same rates from high school, right? And then when you look at desire to go to college from that high school perch, I think there's a less of a desire for many Black men to go to college, to see themselves as college material. And I think that really starts very early on in the educational experience for Black men and really for all people.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can we go to there's so much I want to cover, but the experience once you've applied and admitted, right?
Yep.
So we've gone through that process and they're there. You mentioned graduation rate
Yeah.
differences. Can you talk a little bit about, because you're also very careful to say that by the time you've gone to admission, the differences in GPA and SAT between the men and the women just aren't really there anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that suggests a reasonably efficient and quotes meritocratic process, right? So the men and the women seem to be starting from the same place in terms of those measures of academic preparedness. What happens then? Do you see a difference in graduation rates between the men and the women?
We do. We
Okay.
do. Just like every other institution in the country, we do see a difference. We're working on it diligently. I do want to say that the graduation rate has risen, I think, for the last 5 years in a row for our male population. But it is lower in fourth year, fifth year, and sixth year. The graduation rate is lower in each of those spaces between our female students and our male students. And that has been consistent for some time. We are applying again. So there's a great deal of data on kind of what it takes to be successful in this space. A big part of what we're doing. So I'll talk to you about kind of the entire spectrum. So when a student is admitted, the first thing we do is there's a full day for admitted students. As a part of that day, the Men of the Meccas, kind of the Black Male Initiative at Howard or the Male Initiative at Howard, creates a series of programs for those admitted students. The goal is to really speak to them and help them understand how they can see themselves at Howard. It's almost, I always say we would love for students to feel that they're being recruited at the same level as the top athletes in the country, right? How can we make you feel that same feeling? And I do want to say, you mentioned are young men going to other places? I think there are some young men that say, I want to go to college. I see myself in college as an athlete, right? And many students that see themselves as athletes may not necessarily see HBCUs as a first option, but I don't think there's a statistical significance there that is creating this low number for our students. And so what we do at Howard is we're really dedicated to recruitment and then to direct attention on those accepted students. And so we work with them. We have a partnership. So we have male student leaders on campus. They create a series of programs that are everything from a very basic college tour to a ceremonial welcome to Howard. There's this burning of fear ceremony where the gentlemen actually kind of write down their fears, speak about their fears in a group, and then burn them together, kind of as this ceremonial becoming a Howard man. And so we really try to help them get a glimpse of the social, academic, educational, and otherwise. And then we continue that process. So once they're here, the men also have the opportunity to join a number of our male initiatives. So we do have male initiatives that were created and sponsored by different entities. So the ELC created a male initiative in our School of Business. We have a male initiative in our College of Arts and Sciences. And then I run our larger university male initiative. So we are all working diligently to ensure that we can do exactly what the research says, right? The research is pretty clear on this. Students need community. Students need a sense of belonging. Students need accountability. Students need the ability to understand, identify, and procure resources when they're needed. And so we're taking all that data. The beautiful thing is that the data is there, right? That we have a full understanding of what's needed. But I think you bring up a great point. Even with that understanding, there's still a significant difference in the graduation rate across the country between Black males and Black females. And we are attempting to utilize the data to directly impact that with some of the programs that we've created for that population.
Would you go as far as to say, given the differences we see in the trajectories for men and women, generally, this is not just an HBCU question, that it's even more important for men to feel that sense of community and to be more intentional about
Absolutely. Absolutely.
creating?
Psychologist Jason Wilson, and I use this often. He often says, you know, well, there are two things that he says. He's one of the things is that men and women relate to each other differently, right? Men and women relate side to side. Women relate face to face. And I think in adding to that, the same concept is women have 38 crayons in the crayon box to color with, while men have 8. The basic idea behind that is that frequently male students we're not taught the mechanisms or the procedures of identifying when they need help. They have not been provided with the guidance on how to seek that help. And frequently there are these things pulling on them where they have not been taught to communicate frequently when they are in a space of need. And so what we find in our male population, I appreciate you zooming out beyond the HBCU or beyond the Black male population, what we find in our male populations is that sense of belonging is extremely important. That sense of community is extremely important. One of the things as the university evolves, I didn't tell you, so in 2013, 2014, I think we had 2,900 or so applications from Black men. I just told you in 2025, we had 8,000. That's a significant difference, right? Much more in 2025 than in 2000. We have more Black men on campus, right? Because the campus has grown. So that is one thing that I don't think is necessarily picked up in the data. Our Black male population has grown, right? Because the
In absolute numbers, even
in
if it hasn't
absolute
gone up
numbers,
even if it hasn't gone up in relative numbers. So you're
in
making the point
absolute
that
numbers.
yeah, so unlike a lot of selective institutions, you've actually expanded your campus and you're taking more students, which is something that I wish other selective institutions, especially those with big endowments, would do. But that's a slightly different conversation. So the burning, we talked a bit about this before. I'm really glad you brought up the kind of men of the Mecca and the kind of burning of the fears ceremony.
Yeah.
That feels like a rite of passage. It
Yep.
feels it's gendered, right? You have them
Yeah.
specific, just kind of men for that. The fears are general. Are they fears about being at college specifically, or is it just any fears that are getting in the way of their lives? And how important is it that it's an all male environment? Because I can imagine in other environments, by the way, that would sound quite old fashioned.
Yeah.
Just men burning stuff in a community, etc. Right? I mean, there would be some people that say that doesn't sound like something we should be doing in 2025. But you
Yeah.
talk about it with great pride. Can you say a
Yeah.
bit more about what's going on there?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know we have some Morehouse men online, so I'll give them a shout
Mhm.
out. But Morehouse College has done a really phenomenal job of creating the Morehouse man, right? And
Yeah,
so a big part of what we and I, I'll readily admit to my Morehouse men on the phone on the call that I see some hearts over there that we
yeah.
have adopted this from them in a great deal. A great deal
Mhm.
of this was adopted from the concept of becoming a Morehouse man. When you come to Howard, we want you to come into Howard as a man of Howard and to leave a Howard man, right? And a man of the Mecca, right? And so a big part of what we want to do is welcome you to something that's much larger than you from the very beginning, right? I think students often talk about the importance of feeling like something much larger than yourself. And so from the
Yeah,
very beginning, and I do want to give a shout out to Dr. Mark Lee, who created this some time ago. He was a residence director who had also done some research in Black male development. And he created this Burning of Fears. At that time, it was only for freshman students. So you would come in and it would be really, really ceremonial. One thing you probably know
Mhm.
about the HBCU community is that we have we've developed a great deal of the Divine Nine, the Black fraternities and sororities, and they have a great deal of influence on our culture. And so, a great deal of the ceremonial nature behind the Burning of Fears is really, again, showing you that you're joining something larger than yourself, showing you that
Mhm.
you're important. But there are also some things that we tell the young man. There's some points of guidance in there. So one is we actually reframe this concept of fear. Remember the coloring box, right? We want to
Yep.
give you some more colors to utilize. And so what we do is we help students understand that fear is not a bad thing, right? The reality is we have a bevy of emotions and all of them can be valuable for us. So often we're paralyzed by fear, right? So often
Mm.
we're on the college campuses without anything, with no direction because we're stuck in this space of fear. And so what we try to do is reframe that, but we still burn our fears because we want to acknowledge them and then burn that they're no longer with us in this space. So we're going through that ceremoniously. And I think the point that you make there, we also talk to them. We have said, look to your left and look to your right. Statistics say that one of you guys might not make it. But at this campus, it is your responsibility to make sure that your brother makes it to your left or your right. So there's also this sense of responsibility, right? This sense
Yeah.
of community. And then beyond that, you talk about being all male. There is this, we are very intentional about first of all, I do want to be very clear. All of our events are for male, but it's really for anybody that wants to join. So we
Sure.
always get a number of people. But I think that the idea behind the brotherhood, we are marched out. So we start on one side of the yard. We're marched out at dusk. I'm sorry, at sunset by African drum line and we are saying affirmations behind the drum line as we're walking out to this burning fire pit in the middle of the yard. So there's this ceremonial brotherhood. I am great, right? All of these things that we are
Mhm.
reciting. And then I think a part of that is really this welcome to this brotherhood, right? And after you burn
Mhm.
your fears, it's our first event of the year. You burn your fears, and now you're a part of our world. Where we continue to work with you. You haven't become a man of the Mecca just yet, but the goal is to continue to work with you, like on the Morehouse space, so that you continue to develop and leave here better. So it is important that it's ceremonial. It is important that it is a rites of passage, right? You are now a part of us.
Mhm.
You're a part of our world now. And by the way, there's a responsibility that you have. You don't get a chance to just be here for free. Your responsibility is to look after your brother to the left or the right and to make sure that when he's low, he has somebody to fall back.
There's there's that service element too. One of the I don't know if she's on this call or not, but one of the HEMAC members, Rachel Ponkrantz from Quack Community College, tells this great story where she says she was talking to a young man on the campus and saying, "What can I do for you? What do you need? How can I help you?" And this male student turned to her and said, you know, President, you're always saying what you can do for me. It would be great if sometimes you would say what I can do for you."
Huh.
And it was a kind of revelation moment. It's actually so much of it. We go approach this as like, what can I do for you? What can I do
Yeah.
for you? What can I do for you? And the insight that she gained from that was that very often what people, and maybe particularly some of these young men, need to hear is why we need them.
Yeah.
That they are needed by their brothers, by their colleagues, by the community, by the big brothers, big sisters down the road, etc. And one way to create that sense of belonging is not sort of say, "We're doing this for you, we're doing this for
Yeah.
you, we're doing this for you. We don't want you to be lonely. You're great," but also to say, "You're great," but also you're needed.
we're
Is
we're
that
not
something comes across?
we're not great without you, right? I'm very clear
Yeah.
about that, right? When I was on NPR, I was really clear. Why do I need you to come here? Because your community is less. Well, our classes are less effective without you. our community, our conversations are less effective without you. There's a distinct need. And honestly, let's zoom out a bit, Richard. You and I have had this conversation before, but it's really important, right? The reason why I'm so passionate about this space, and I'm probably going to get emotional, as you've seen me get emotional before, is because this topic is not just about the higher education outcomes for Black people. When you think about this and you zoom out of it, what we're really talking about is the future of the Black community. Right? What does the Black family consist of? What does social mobility look like? And ultimately, yes, college is a great mechanism for social mobility, but it's also a great mechanism for growth and development, finding out who you are. What do I see in that mirror and how do I feel about that? Right. And so when the Black male is no longer a part of the educational, the higher educational process, and to zoom out, the Black female, and I think you astutely noted this in Boys and Men, is in a lot of ways the most educated demographic today. I think she's going to far surpass white women and white men in a few moments in every category. And Black males are the trajectories in the opposite direction, right? We're at the bottom of the trajectory and we're only going down. If you trace that data forward, if you just trace both of those forward, what you have is a disconnected and disjointed Black family. I think the Black community is at risk. And ultimately, when you think about this concept, you and I, when we had our first conversation, we spoke about the racial wealth gap, right? Mm-hmm. There is no ability to close that racial wealth gap without a focus on the Black male, according to some theorists like Raj Chetty out of Harvard, right? Mm-hmm. But even if you don't go directly into Raj Chetty's research, what we all understand is that the family is a foundational unit for the development of wealth, for the accrual of wealth. If the Black community is going to be in a different state tomorrow, it's going to be because there is a developed and persisting Black family. Unfortunately, the data that we have right now shows that tomorrow the Black female is the head of the household, the provider, the caregiver, and everything else. And the Black male is really looking for a space in society. Now, I do want to say, you brought up something, and I'm sorry. No, Melinda brought up something in our kind of pre-conversation. There was a question of, well, are Black males just going somewhere else, right? Is college no longer just a phenomenal option for them? Are they doing other things? And I'm certainly willing to have that conversation, right? I do want to say, as a higher education executive, higher education is too expensive. We have to change the model that we have right now. This is not going to work for the next 20 or 30 years. The only people that are going to be able to come here are going to be people that are on full scholarship. And we know that that's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to take out loans tomorrow because of the big, beautiful bill, or people who are affluent. So I understand that there are a number of things weighing against them. I think AI is coming to change the way we understand college. But I think right now, all the data shows that for historically marginalized and oppressed populations, education, a college degree, is still one of the best investments that you can make in your life. And so if Black men are completely removed from that, there's no ability to accrue wealth. The Black family is disjointed and disconnected. And unfortunately, when you look at the generational poverty, right? These are things that are now recycled from generation to generation. And for me, again, it's more than a notion, right? This right now, if we cannot impact this at a Howard University, at a Morehouse, at a Morgan, at a Bowie, at the PWI institutions as well, then I think we're at the front end of a significant issue for the Black community tomorrow. And as you point out, that's not just a Black community issue. That issue is going to permeate the larger society from America and beyond as well.
Yeah, all of that was beautifully put, and I think the lessons that we can learn from some of the experiences of HBCUs, but also of what's happened to Black men, is how do we switch from this intergenerational cycle of male disadvantage, right, which is particularly acute for Black men in all the ways you just said, to generational wealth building. Yeah. Right. And what does that look like? And one of the reasons why you mentioned Raj Chetty's work, but the essential importance of HBCUs as these upward mobility, escalate. That's how I came to HBCUs really in the first place, was just to see the disproportionate work that HBCUs do in terms of kind of promoting the share of Black men and women into the professions. And so when you see these huge gender gaps in like the Black lawyers, for example, a lot of that is because of the gender gaps at HBCUs, right? So it comes back to that. And I love the way you've broadened this out and made this, I think, a moral imperative, as well as a lesson for everybody else to learn from. I'm gonna want people to ask questions in a minute, but I want to come back a bit specific to Howard. Right, you've now made a big public commitment to this. Your president, you talked about this in the state of the university. So this has become a very explicit goal for you. I just want to talk about how that's landing in the community, what resistance, if any, you're facing to that, how faculty are getting engaged in it. One of the things we talk about a lot in HEMAC is just the permission space for this work, building coalitions, the understandable political sensitivities around it. I mean, Howard has a long-standing Black feminist history as well, and so I can imagine that the conversations and coalition building has to be it's interesting, it has to be done carefully. But you seem all in, as your president is. Can you talk a little bit about how that conversation started and how it's going?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And I think, you and I think you're a feminist. I'm probably a pseudo feminist, but I think we are both very acutely aware of patriarchy, the role of patriarchy, and the role of misogyny in American society and globally. And I think we are acutely aware of that here as well. So at Howard, there had been a big push for more women in the executive spaces, right? Our previous president came in, and I'd never seen this before. He was very unapologetic, right? We need more women in leadership, and the reality is, we need a woman president. Like, let's cut through the fluff. You can't have a population with 70% women. We've been here 155 years. Let's make this happen. And so we've had a very real and public focus on women in leadership, and it's been phenomenal. I think at one point we had 10 or 14 of our deans were women, and so most of the people in leadership were women. He's been very dogmatic about his approach to that. I think the university is also very aware of this and wants to make a change in this, and they've been very open to the community as we've come in and push the institution a bit. There's not been much pushback. There's been a little bit, but again, one of the things that I have to think about is that the Black woman has been the greatest advocate for the Black male since the existence of time, right? And so I think when we zoom out of this, you and I have discussed this. We have to be able to chew gum and to walk at the same time. I am on the executive committee of the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership, and I take that role very, very seriously. And members of the leadership for the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership are also advisors for the men of the Mecca space. So we're communicating regularly. We are also strategizing regularly. Oddly enough, the current director of the center is a person who, I don't even know what you call somebody who's really looking after the future of boys and men, but she is a feminist plus whatever we are, right? Whatever you call this work that we're doing.
She's a she for he. Have you heard the term he for she, which is this coalition, right? Then I'm trying to socialize this idea of a she for he, which is like a powerful woman who still wants women to have more opportunity, but also is in favor of men. So I'm using hashtag she for he.
Okay, I think my friend.
Try that out.
Yeah, I think my friend would appreciate that. I'll mention it at our next meeting. But she's very passionate about the work that I do, and I'm very passionate about the work that she does. And at the highest level of the institution, I had a presentation in front of the cabinet recently, and they were just they're completely receptive. Our president is receptive. Our leadership is receptive. I do want to say there have been a couple of meetings when I mentioned it, and one person might say, well, what about women? What about females? And I think that's always a conversation that we should have, right? If there are ever any questions around that, I don't think we should shy away from it. And ultimately, I think we have to be in coalition as we move forward. So I'm not a person that approaches this work as if patriarchy and misogyny are not systems that are causing pain every day. As a matter of fact, I think it's important to mention the gender wealth gap has increased again, right? For the first time, I think since the 90s, you've had consecutive years of the gender income gap increasing, right? Which, based on the work that you and I do, is just it does not compute, right? It does not compute. So I think we have to be able to see the issues of women and be very dedicated, as I know you are, to impacting those and ensuring that we don't hold our breath at all, that we don't miss a beat at all as we are advocating for men. And I'm happy to say, I think the Howard community has been receptive to that. Again, one thing I'll say in a somewhat lighthearted manner, as an undergrad student, when I was here at Howard, as a heterosexual, you think, oh, this is great. This is the bee's knees, right? Well, on the other end of that spectrum, right, if you're a young lady, and you're a heterosexual young lady, it's not the bee's knees. So you know who really wants our population to evolve? Our young
Yes,
ladies, right? Our young ladies really want our population to evolve. And so they've been really supportive. And I think we have a larger coalition that really, and again, I want to continue to go back to your study because we've known this. I'm a Howard alum. When I came to Howard in 2004, we were about 30%. It didn't register to me to start this global campaign then, right? Because again, so many of us have been acculturated to see that as normative. And then your study and putting it in those bold words in that way, it put it in a way that none of us could turn away from it. And so I do again. I want to thank you for that work. This has to be on the front of everybody's table. And again, I think to your point, in a lot of ways, it's a moral imperative, right? The entire country is going to suffer if we cannot fix this. And ultimately, I appreciate you by specifying black males. It's not that black males are the most important. It's that if we cannot impact this group, what we're going to see is that this larger community, this part of the community falls off, which is going to have a significant drag on the larger empire, right? The empire is not going to be able to continue
I
without a
completely
healthy,
agree.
without a
Yeah.
healthy change.
And also, I just don't think you can talk about racial justice without talking about this issue. And it's frustrated me that some progressive circles have struggled to get past that. And I just want to say, we'll go to some questions that are coming up here, but I think I'm going to give a shout out to the work of Algernon Austin, who's a research fellow at AIBM, but is at the Center for Economic Policy Research, who focuses on employment about black men. And he shows that the unemployment rate for black men is much higher than for white men in almost every US state, whereas that's not true for black women. But then as you dig into the data, one of the reasons for that is precisely as you just identified, because so many more black women are having to be the sole or primary breadwinner.
Yeah.
And so there's this double shift issue, right? And so this is why, in the end, it's like not good for anybody
Yeah.
if everybody doesn't do better. And I think that's influencing the wage gap now too, because you've got these differences in childcare responsibilities as well. So let's get a couple of questions. I could literally keep going for the next 4 hours, but we've got some good questions here. So Timothy Lindsay's asked about which courses people are taking. It's in the kind of webinar chat here. Black men taking STEM over, for example, health and education field, liberal arts fields. What do you know? And maybe you don't have this to hand, in which case we can follow up. But do you know anything about the differences in coursework?
Yeah, I don't have the data in front of me, and as a representative of the university, I don't want to speak on that without the data. But what I will say is that we do have, just like all institutions, we do have our typical spaces that still have more males than not, right? When you go to the School of Business, if you're in finance, you're going to find more males, right? Really, in the entire School of Business, you're going to find more males than in the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm sorry, especially in the College of Fine Arts. Our engineering program, you're going to find more males than in our pharmacy program, right? And so I think we do have those typical things, but I don't want to speak on it in a detailed way because I don't have the data. But Richard, what I will say is I know you've done a lot of work on this. One of the things that we're looking at now is how do we expose boys before they get to Howard to these career fields that may not be a natural or normative to them, right? How do we expose them to the careers of tomorrow? So I think that's something that we're very, very dedicated in. I actually had a meeting with our pharmacy team, right? And they're very interested, as well as our nursing team. They're very interested in how to invigorate our undergraduate population to see those as viable graduate school and professional school options.
That is so interesting. I'd love to learn more about that, even kind of offline. And pharmacy is a great example of a profession that used to skew very male until pretty recently, and then it's very rapid. This sense of like if people have got this idea like pharmacy is a female profession, well, it wasn't yesterday,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that tells us the good news there is it tells us these things can change quite fast, but the bad news is that people kind of very quickly come to assume that a certain profession is coded male or female. And so I'd love to learn more about that. And I agree also starting early. So AIBM's done some work on, this is ninth graders. What are their career at? What do they think they're going to be doing when they're 30?
Yeah.
And what you find is that for the girls, the modal answer, the most common answer is something in healthcare.
Yeah.
For boys, the modal answer is, I don't know. Which is interesting. Which is interesting in and of itself, followed by something kind of but healthcare is like way down there.
Yeah.
There's a question here about first gen. Do you know anything about whether or not there's any differences? What share do you know just even broad brush, what share of first gen and whether that's interacting at all with
Yeah.
gender. In other words, the question is how much does having college educated parents help students attend HBCUs?
Yeah.
Question mark. And do you know any gender differences by that?
Yeah, so I don't have the data specific to HBCUs, but I do know that having college educated parents makes it far more likely that you're interested in college. I think I'll answer that by kind of zooming back and kind of going to some of the work that we haven't talked about yet.
Right.
Having college educated parents does one thing very well. It helps you understand that college is a possibility for you, right? You have college educated parents, you know from day one that college is a possibility for you. So many Black men have never, ever had the opportunity to see college as an opportunity for them. There's this belief gap that exists, right? The gap between what students can achieve and what teachers, disciplinarians, principals, deans believe the students can achieve. The Black male is at the bottom of that belief gap. So what that means is that all of the implicit biases that we have, and we all have implicit biases, but all the implicit biases that we have as teachers then permeate the manner in which we interact with our students. What we see is the Black male, again, I told you that I was a student here with 30% male, and it didn't go off in my mind that this was for many of us, again, it's very normative that this is not for us, that this is not a part of our space. Well, unfortunately, we learn that message very early on in life, right? Those messages are typically communicated in P through 3. So what happens with a college educated family is that college educated family is able to interact with that teacher in a different way, right? At least theoretically, right? Is able to have a more educated conversation and have a better understanding of what's needed for that child in that classroom. I think the other thing is that child potentially, right, and this doesn't always happen, is typically or sometimes provided with messages of capabilities of their. For me, it was an expectation, right? My father dropped out of school in 9th grade. I knew from the moment that I had my first breath that college wouldn't be my end. I would have to go beyond that as far as I could, right? And this is from a 9th grade educated father that made it very clear that education will be your passport to a world that we can never avail you to. My mother had a college education, but they were very clear. We can't give you the world that you need to inherit. Education is going to do that. So I think having college educated parents gives that one step up. I always think about the Steph Curry analogy. Steph Curry, I know you're from across the pond.
I know, but I know who Steph Curry is. Give me some credit, Calvin. I've been here a few years now.
But I always tell the story of Steph Curry because Steph Curry, his father was an NBA player, Dale Curry.
Yeah.
Dale Curry had 2 kids, Steph and Seth, who are both in the NBA. Steph and Seth both had that foundational element of growing up on the lap of NBA players. They grew up in NBA locker rooms. As a result, they said, this is a real possibility for me. And then Steph could work toward that. For so many of the young guys out playing on the basketball courts around the corner, they'll say, yeah, I'm going to the league. But that deep-seated belief and the ability to actually see themselves there, it impacts their self-efficacy, right? And that self-efficacy is so, so important as we think about young men and all people, but in this case, we're talking about young men in developing their own identity. So if they're receiving the messages of inferiority from the belief gap, what do you have to combat that? How can I then develop an educational identity that allows me to see myself as capable? If you put me in timeout 3 times in class, if you're doing all of these things to show me that you don't believe that I'm capable, how can I possibly be something on the other side of that? And we find that self-efficacy, right? This psychological theory, self-efficacy theory is a foundational element in the way young men show up, right? I was reading your research from AIBM on gifted and talented, and I was so excited.
I just dropped that in the chat.
Oh, that's so funny.
Because I was about to mention it, but keep going.
No, you mentioned it. Then I don't want to steal your thunder.
No. I mean, just because it's interesting. That's where we were both going with the thinking, because it was this issue about identity, right? On both the deficit framing around exclusions, particularly for Black boys, underestimation of their abilities. But on the other hand, as we saw, I put it in the chat here, is like and Melinda did it at the same time. Okay, so which is showing, for those who don't click through the link, it shows that getting into a gifted and talented program has a big impact on college enrollment for low-income boys, but not for low-income girls. Now, this is based on income, so it's not done by race. But nonetheless, we're going to know that there will be overrepresentation because of income inequality through race. For boys, but not for girls. And I think a plausible explanation of that is exactly this identity point, which is actually you're taking these boys who are, they do have real talents. Yep. They're from backgrounds which maybe are going to suggest, actually, almost regardless of their race, but especially if they're Black, this isn't for you. And actually, someone has said, this is for you.
Yep.
It
Absolutely.
doesn't seem like the
Not
girls
only,
needed to be
but
told that. The girls
not,
knew that.
not only is it for you, but you're capable. Like that's the crazy. It is hard for me to explain how important that is. That I believe that you're capable, that I see you and I have faith in you. Not that, as we all, you point out the neurological differences in development between boys and girls. I always say, I have a 6 year, I almost called him 5. He just turned 6 last week. I have a 6-year-old who's in kindergarten. And I always say he's a great student, he gets great marks, but I always say for half of the class, he's expected to sit in front of the class, quiet with his hands folded. And he's thinking in his head, man, I know what you're saying is important, but if I could just do this backflip, if I could do this backflip first, then I could really listen to what you got to say, right? But as soon as he does that backflip, the teacher says, hey, you're a bad student, go sit outside. That's what bad students do, right? And so there are all of these unique dynamics that are helping him understand that he's not capable. This is not for me. And I always say the young black man never stops dreaming. So the young black man who was a third grader didn't stop dreaming. He just now created dreams that now circumvent formal education. Because in first grade, second grade, and third grade, he was beat up. And these were my peers. So I can give you my personal anecdote of the gifted and talented program. I'm from Los Angeles Unified School District, was not provided a very phenomenal education from Los Angeles Unified School District, but I was tapped gifted and talented starting in the third grade. What that did was, remember, I already had a father and a mother that were pushing me saying, you're great. What happened is in the classroom, I actually, once my teacher said that and my parents said that, I started to believe it. Once
Mm-hmm.
I started to believe it, everything changed. Once I started to believe it, what did I do? I worked like a person who was capable. It changed the way I worked. That's the Steph Curry model, right? When you see yourself there, you work differently. Your practice is different, what you eat different, how you sleep. I'm really going there. So if I'm really going there, I need to put in this work today. It's not a distant possibility. This is who I am and this is where I'm going. And so I think the installation of that in young men has to come from somewhere. Let's zoom out. Everybody's got to be able to see themselves as Steph. Can I take that young man from his low income neighborhood? Can I take him from a place where nobody else has done this? And can I provide him with the same belief that Steph Curry has? He's never going to get to sit on the lap of an NBA player, but it is our responsibility to now instill in him, the same belief that Steph, as soon as he has that belief that Steph has, he succeeds. Because what we find is that in that data, there's nothing to say that black men are less intelligent. There's nothing to say that they're less capable. So what we know is that as soon as you have the belief in yourself, now again, there are tons of systematic and societal barriers, right? As we've outlined. But what my research has shown is that you put in extra effort. The reason why gifted and talented was so important to me is because I put in extra effort. My friends then saw me as different. My teacher saw me as different. Everybody saw me as capable. Once everybody believes you're capable, you then act that way. Now, I do want to say, I do understand Mom Donnie's point when he's saying everybody should get that, right? If you're doing that for one person, what about all the people you're not doing that for? And I do empathize with that. And I do understand that. I would love an effective public education system. We don't have it yet. And so what I need is an environment where we can do everything that we can at this contemporary time. I would love an education system that measures self-efficacy for your students on the front end, the middle, and the back end. I would love for teachers to be to have evaluations on the level that a level of self-efficacy that their students leave with, right? But until we have an environment where we can ensure that every student is educated properly in a public school system, we need mechanisms like gifted and talented. We need everything that we can to figure out how
Yeah.
do we instill into these young men this concept that to give them the Steph Curry gene.
We can have different ways to signal that identity point. Right? It doesn't have to be through gifted and talented. It could be through something else. But I think it's clearly, from a boys and men perspective, a tool that you do not want to put down, given what it's doing. But I think for one of the reasons that I'm sort of borderline obsessed with more male educators, especially male educators of color in K-12, is because I think there is some evidence about how they treat behavior somewhat differently on average. And I want to be clear, like, this is not in any way a knock on the majority of female teachers, who are the majority, but it is something I think the evidence looks as if it's as much about this kind of identity, and kind of seeing yourself in the educator helps you, or at least some of your educators helps you to see yourself in education. And
Black
that's
men,
that's in identity, not just institution.
Black men are, you never have to apologize about that again. Black men are 1%, 1% of the education workforce. So what that
Yeah.
means is that the vast majority of black men don't have a black male teacher. And if they do, they have to
Yeah.
wait till they get to an HBCU to get one, right?
Yeah,
So the
you can go all the
reality,
way. You can go all the way through and never encounter a black male
yep.
teacher.
And you
Yeah.
can't be what you can't see, right? How do I even on the HBCU front? You mentioned HBCUs. When I go to HBCUs, do I see black faculty members? Do I see black staff, black male faculty members? Do I see black male staff members? All of those things come into play. But I think you've hit it spot on. I know Curtis Valentine, who's on your team, has
Yeah.
this concept of real men teach. I think the reality is that you have touched on something that is going to be a foundational element of what success looks like in the future. We have to put more black men in the classroom, but not in just P through 12. The point I'm making is we have to put them in from P through graduate and professional institutions. We want them to be the people that are
Yeah.
touching our young people as well. Not to your point, not exclusively, but I don't even feel
No.
the need to apologize about that. We're at 1% right now. You know how far we have to go before we're having any type of exclusivity
You just
conversation.
want you just want representation, I think
Yeah.
is what we're saying here. So I think we're trying to do at least one more. This is actually from there's an anonymous attendee, but it's signed Delandra about this sense of like you can just go and get money somewhere else, right? It's back to this point about look, we wouldn't worry so much if men or black men in particular weren't going to college if they were just going off to do something else
Oh
awesome,
yeah.
right? And they're saying that they want to earn money now, short run. I can go into the labor market now, especially the labor market. Why would I bother with another 2 or 4 years of college? So the question is, can you think about different, given that that's the kind of narrative that's out there? And I got to tell you, online, it's a big narrative.
Yeah, I get it.
Online, a lot of the influencers
Yeah.
are saying to men, and it includes a lot of the black online influencers,
Yeah.
you know what you need is entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
passive income, crypto, whatever it is, don't be a fool
Yeah.
and get loaded with debt to go to one of these stupid colleges because you'll end up working in coffee shop. Anyway, so there is a strong narrative that you're fighting
Yeah.
against. So given that, any thoughts on how you
Yeah.
overcome that narrative?
What is my pitch, right? So ultimately, listen, here's the reality. I always tell people this is antiquated data, it's old data, but it's still true. I think 6% of the black community makes over $100,000 in 2025. Let just everybody zoom out for a minute. In 2025, 6% of the black community makes
Mhm.
over $100,000, right? So that's significant. We're just talking about a community where most of those people online, they don't really make money. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's all an illusion. So what I'm going to tell the young man is that the vast majority of those people in that 6% have college degrees. That's just the reality, right? If you're thinking about social mobility from a historically marginalized and oppressed population, now if you have a trust fund, if your father gave you a trust fund, we might even have a different kind of conversation, right? But if you're coming from a historically marginalized and oppressed population, what we're talking about is providing you with growth, development, and then that big one at the end is social mobility. So when we talk about income, when we talk about making money, there's a saying in the streets that all money ain't good money, right? And so, yes, you can make this money right now. Yeah, I got you. And the reality is, to be clear, there are lots of ways to make money right now. But what I'm telling you is that if you can go through this process, and I love to sell black men on college, especially Howard. If you can go through this process, I can guarantee you this. One, it's going to change who you see in them. I don't send black men to college for degrees. I send black men to college for education. The degree is the free jewelry that you get in pursuit of that. But the real thing that I want you to do is I want you to have what happened to me. I'm from LA, hadn't really left LA, came to DC. My first semester on campus, my teacher says, let's go to Paris. I'm teaching you world civilizations. Let's go study this in Paris. So I go to Paris and I have all of these phenomenal experiences. But the one that changed my life was I got out of the airplane, we got onto the train, and I'm coming off of the train, walking to the Disney Hotel. And as I'm walking down the street, and this may be a little foreign to you, Richard, because you're not as familiar with American racism, but when I walked down the street, white women didn't cross the street. It was literally mind blowing. Nobody clutched their purse. And so for me as an 18-year-old from LA, where literally every person that I ever interacted with in my entire life had treated me in the same way, going abroad, seeing that there's a different perception of me here completely changed the way I saw myself. So as soon as I came back, this was the third week of my freshman year of college. As soon as I came back, I acted differently. I pursued different things, right? But while at
Mhm.
Howard, I traveled to 12 different countries. That education made me a better person. So when I talk to that young black man, what I'm saying is this: the reason why I want you to go to college is yes, on the other end of this degree, you're going to be able to make a lot more money, hopefully, right? And I do want to put a couple I do want to put a
All right.
couple asterisks there because there's some unique things happening with AI, but I still feel confident in saying that if you go through this college educational experience, the opportunities on the other side are far more lucrative, right? That's one. Yes,
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, there are a number of ways, but beyond your social mobility, what I really focus on is the growth and development, right? And I know that's a little, now again, I have to figure out what level of person I'm speaking to, how hungry they are. If they're not able to eat tonight and they're at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, none of this whimsical stuff is going to mean anything to them, right? And to be honest, for that person who's at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, who's still worried about food, shelter, and welfare, the reality is that there is a different equation. So the first thing that I want to say is that I understand that there is this perception now that college is less attractive for a number of reasons. What I would say is that all the data still shows, based on everything that I have,
Completely.
that
100%.
for historically marginalized and oppressed population, this is your passport.
Yeah, I mean, you can fight it with data. Here are the charts. Here's the ROI. I completely agree with you about all of that. These are the facts. These are the illusions, to use your language online. Here's the actual information about the value of higher education and college. But I also think, and this comes back almost to, we're going to end almost where we began, which is that the immediate offer has to also feel attractive.
Yeah.
The immediate sense this is going to be somewhere where I'm going to feel like I belong. It's going to be fun. It's going to be like a place, because you can show an 18-year-old a chart of lifetime earnings.
Yeah.
And it just, I mean, I've got 3 boys in their 20s, and like trying to explain lifetime earnings to an 18-year-old is just really, really hard, maybe especially to boys. So I think you've got to do both. You've got to fight with facts, but also to say, and you know what, this is also just going to be an awesome place for you to be and to grow.
I skipped that part because everybody knows how phenomenal Howard is. So I skipped
All
it.
right. Well, you told that at the beginning. I mean, like anyone who heard the beginning of your talk knows that. I think a lot of people who are struggling with this,
Yeah.
sometimes I think we overestimate the kind of ability of the data and the facts and the charts and the ROIs to influence the decision making of a young man who's 18, who's hearing a lot, and who just needs to feel, to come back to what you said before, like he's going to belong.
Yeah.
He's going to be needed. He's going to be part of a brotherhood. It's going to be fun, and he's going to grow. And it's a reminder that I hate what I'm about to say is going to make me sound like this, like Oxford educated English posh person, and that's, some of that is true. But the root of education from the Latin is educere, which is to draw out. And everything I've heard you talk about is about the role of education as drawing out what's already there. In your case, focused on Black men and helping it to flourish and grow economically, but also spiritually, culturally, and in every other way. And so you keep saying growth and identity and belonging. And so that's clearly what you think the heartbeat of education is about. So you've been very kind about AIBM's work and my work. I want to back at you, thank you for all the work you're doing at Howard, and more broadly to try and kind of lift up Black men, Black families, and I think by extension the whole country with the work that you're doing. And so in the interest of being respectful of everybody's time, I'm going to let everybody go. I'm going to thank you again on behalf of the HEMAC community, AIBM, and all of us working in this space for your work, and hope we get the chance to do something again very, very soon, if not at Learning Man, then somewhere else. And you're seeing lots of love coming up here. Yeah. So thanks again to everybody for coming, and thanks again to you, especially to you, Calvin.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for all that you do, man. Continue the good work.